Kansas crushed by Creighton. Is this an indictment on the team, or was it just a bad performance we discuss on today's Locked On Jayhawks?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Eric Johnson, you can find me on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every show. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and you can find us on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we are recapping the Kansas Creighton game. Was this an indictment on how good this team possibly is, or was this just a bad game because Kansas was blown out and it felt like a lot of games that they suffered a season ago when they did not have nearly as good of a season as many of you hoped for? First, today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. So we'll recap the game. We'll get into our game awards. We'll get into that conversation and what's next for KU all on today's episode of the show. So let's start with this. Was this an indictment on the team? Like, is this what this team is? Like, is this team, did they show a lot of, Achilles heel in this one? And you might be saying, oh, well, the bigger sample size, they beat North Carolina and Michigan State. North Carolina just got smashed by Alabama. They're sitting at 4-4. How good of a win really was that for Kansas at this point in time? The Michigan State win. Michigan State's been fine, but they haven't been that great. Now, the Duke win, that one seems to be holding up very well and shows the ceiling of this team. But is this going to be what the floor of this team is? That the ceiling, we know they can beat some of the best teams in the country. They showed that a little bit last year, but that the floor is that you are going to be in danger when you go on the road, similar to last year's team. And I think that's what was unfortunate about this. It felt like, Kansas didn't just lose this game on the road. You look at the 2019-20 team that was the best team in the country. They lost their Big 12 Big East game at Villanova, but that was a close game. This was a blowout, and that made it feel a lot like, last year's results when things weren't going well for you. And just like everything went wrong for KU in this game. Kansas only shoots 36% from the floor. They only shot 36% on 2-point shots, which is their worst since the 2022 season. Ironically, the game that they had the worst 2-point shooting percentage, they shot under 30% on twos. That was in a win over Texas on senior day for that national title winning season. So I don't know, maybe that's actually a good sign. But they only shot 36% on twos. They actually shot 35% on threes, 8 of 23. Only 5 did at the free throw line, didn't get to the free throw line very well. So you weren't getting to the free throw line, and part of that was, in the first half, I think it was a little bit about you weren't driving to the rim. I think you were going for the shots that they wanted you to take, which were those little push shots, the floaters, which we talked about in the pregame that was okay. The ones that I didn't like were the out of system or Dajuan launching up a billion shots or the contested mid-range shots. You're not going to get fouled as many on those. In addition to that, the refs were horrible in this game. The whistle was incredibly one-sided, and Creighton kept getting away with push-offs and everything. That didn't decide the game. Creighton still, whooped Kansas in this one, but that obviously wasn't great. And so you have those things going against you. You're not shooting well from twos. In the second half, you felt like you said, hey, we didn't take any layup attempts really in the first half. Let's force the issue. Let's take some layups in the second half. And they were just like, okay, we're going to play vertical defense and we're going to play good defense. We have good rim protection. And then the times that we don't, we're probably not going to get called for a foul. And we are just going to shut down your twos. And then KU is going to miss a billion layups. So you didn't shoot layups well in this game. In the end, Kansas goes 8 of 18, so below 50% on layups. That obviously is also not good. The 3-point defense was really bad. We knew coming in, Creighton takes a lot of threes. They hadn't been making a lot of threes, just 31%. We figured they were probably a better 3-point shooting team than that, though, and they were due for a reversion to the mean. Well, they had that reversion in this game. 12 of 29 from 3, 41%. Now, part of that was they were probably due for a reversion. Another part of it was maybe they got a little lucky that this will be a bit of an outlier performance for them. But also, I think above it all, there were a lot of open threes, especially in that first half, that Kansas gave up, and that continues to be a bugaboo for this Kansas defense. And when you have Hunter Dickinson out there, it's going to be harder to guard, the 3-point shooting. And the times where you did hard hedge ball screens and you had Hunter chasing a perimeter player on the outside, they got a dunk out of it because you ended up with Ryan Kalkbrenner rolling by. So it's like it's very hard to set up a good defense with the for this specific matchup, I should say, right? There are certain matchups that it doesn't impact you as much, but for a team who's just going to have like everybody shooting threes and is going to be taking 30 in a game and is going to stress you that way, it's really hard for KU to set a defense with their current personnel that is going to work well against that. And then above all and beyond, I mean, Kansas actually did a great job with turnovers in this game. It was 15-5 in turnovers. They led. Creighton had the 15. Kansas only had 5. He led 12-7 in points off turnovers. I know the rebounding battle doesn't look great, but that's just because Kansas missed a billion more shots. They missed 17 more shots than Creighton, so obviously that's going to be a part of it. But it's the shot selection in this one. Shot selection and shot distribution in this one are the ones that really come to mind. So you look at the shot selection. I thought this was especially bad in the first. The second half, it was just forcing the issue of layups that weren't always there. But at least maybe you can live with that a little bit more, because typically if you do that, you're going to get to the free throw line more. Again, didn't really happen in this game. And typically those are going to be higher percentage shots. In the first half, you were just taking some bad shots, I think in general, but also the shot distribution. Dajuan Harris shot 21 times in this game. Now, Dajuan's had some good offensive performances this year. You don't want him taking 21 shots. That's not part of his game. And in theory, if you were stacking guys up on this team in terms of who's your best bucket getters, Dajuan is not going to be, right? In theory, it should be AJ Storr. It should be Hunter Dickinson. It should be like Zeke Mayo. You don't want Dajuan taking 21 shots, right? The best part of his game is his defense, his facilitating, and that he can make some shots here and there that fit into the rhythm of the offense. So that was not great. You end up with Hunter Dickinson only taking 4 shots, and the KU 3 big men between Dickinson, Badunga, and Clemence taking a combined 7 shots in the game for KU. And if you add KJ Adams into that discussion of big men, 13 shots from those 4 players compared to 21 shots for Dajuan Harris. So that's not great shot distribution. And I know Ryan Kalkbrenner is this really good defensive big man. He's going to limit shots on the inside, and their 2 4-men are 6'10", so they're clogging up the paint. But it felt like Kansas didn't really even try to get Hunter Dickinson on the block, right? It felt like they weren't even trying to post the ball. I don't know what was up with that, but you end up with a game where Hunter Dickinson has 6 points and only takes 4 shots. And I don't know if that was more on like the individuals, were they making, was it a decision to do that? Like, I don't entirely know. It definitely, I think, becomes a problem when if Hunter Dickinson is going to only be getting up 4 shots, it almost gets rid of the whole purpose of him being out there if he's playing 25 minutes per game. Because the whole idea of Hunter Dickinson is going to be that he is this unbelievably great offensive big man, that he has this great finesse, that he has this great post work and everything like that, that he's going to give you an advantage on the rebounding battle and as an offensive post scorer, and that you're going to be able to work your offense around that post scoring. Well, if he's only taking 4 shots, he's not having a big impact on the offensive end. And then if you're talking about, okay, well then how can he have a positive impact on the game? Well, we talked about this just a minute ago. This is not a good defensive matchup for Hunter Dickinson, a team that launches a bunch of threes and is going to spread you out. Bad matchup for Hunter Dickinson. So if he's not giving you anything on offense, it's going to be a problem on the defensive end. So just like so many things went wrong for KU in this game. Creighton was hot from 3. Pop Isaacs, who came in not having a single game. Pop Isaacs didn't have a single game in his first 8 games where he shot above 40% from the floor. He went 10 of 15 from this game. Now, a lot of those were wide open shots, right? Makes it a lot easier on him. Some of them were maybe got a good bounce here or there. Some of them were contested. He just made a good shot. He goes 10 for 15 in the game, 6 of 9 from 3. So, like, it's a combination of those things. I will say, if we're answering the question here, was this an indictment on Kansas or was this just a bad game? I think it is a little bit of both. I know that's cheating a little bit on the answer. But if you want me to lean toward one more than the other, I am right now just leaning toward it just being a bad game. Because it's happened just one time. Last year, it happened multiple times. It kept happening. And so if you go out on the road this weekend at Missouri and you lose again, then maybe we'll circle back to this and say, yeah, maybe that is an indictment of who they are. But as of now, the bigger sample size, that this is the one-off. They looked a little sluggish. They looked like they missed a lot of shots that they didn't normally make. You were without Rylan Griffin, who, I guess Kansas has been lost twice if you count the exhibition game to Arkansas, both in blowouts, both without Rylan Griffin. So maybe he's the most valuable player on the team for Kansas. And, that led to the first half wing minutes being a disaster. You got 2 combined points, 1 of 5, like 3 fouls from the 2 wings who were playing without Ryan Griffin in the first half. Now, Storr had a good second half, or at least a decent second half there. But, as of right now, I'm just leaning toward this being a bad game where you missed a bunch of shots, you missed a bunch of layups, you had a weird game plan. In a weird way, it felt a little bit like that Washington game at the T-Mobile Center like a handful of years ago. I think that was 2018. Just from the standpoint of, if you remember, like they basically were like, we're going to only let Gerald Vick shoot for your team. And that it was like that, but with Dajuan Harris in a different way. They played zone, and it was kind of a different way in how it went about. But this felt a little bit like that to me. And Creighton was hitting shots. Creighton always does well against number 1 teams at home, or like top 5 teams at home. That's just what they do. They were due for a big performance, and they kind of hit it. So as of right now, I am leaning toward that. But this definitely backs up some worries I had about the 3-point defense and, just how dominant of a team is Kansas number 1? Are they number 5? Whatever it is, like, yes, absolutely on some of those things. All right, let's get to our game awards here real quick. I guess real quick, before we get into the game awards, I will say we saw a little bit more minutes from Marquise Passmore and Zach Clemence in this one. I actually liked the Zach Clemence minutes in this one. The Marquise Passmore minutes did not go super well. Starting to wonder if he's going to end up getting buried on the depth chart. I don't know. Maybe you can't afford to right now. Obviously, you can't with Rylan Griffin out as well, but it seems like it's going to take him another year to kind of come around here. I will say also, if we're talking about Indictment long term, like that basically zone where Creighton in the first half was just like, they did it all game, but Dajuan just shoot the ball. I'm not overly worried because, again, no Rylan Griffin. Not all teams have a Ryan Kalkbrenner in the middle for elite rim protection. And if Dajuan is shooting the ball from 3 at more career norms than what he has so far early this season, then it's going to be just fine. All right, game awards next. This is Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com. You can join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Jayhawks, making your first listen every day. Check out Locked On College Basketball, Locked On College Football for your second listen every day. And certainly that I mentioned kind of felt like some of the performances last year. It certainly felt that way on the offensive end. It felt like a lot of times last year Kansas ended up being a slog on the offensive end. But again, not every team's going to have Ryan Kalkbrenner. Hopefully a good learning experience for KU, but that was certainly ugly for Kansas. So Zach Clemence was 2 for 2. Hunter Dickinson was 2 for 4. Outside of that, no player on KU. I guess Flory was 1 for 1. No player on KU shot 50%. I mean, it's kind of bad all the way around for this one for KU. But again, unless they start stringing these bad performances together, I'm going to just view this as a bad game. And then long term, I still think they're going to be all right. You have that Duke win, which looks really good. And last I saw, Duke was leading Auburn, which looked like the best team in the country. So who knows how that one will finish and everything. All right, game awards in this one. The best moment. It's a little harder to pick the best moment in a game that you lose by 13 points. I did think the Zeke Mayo 3, you were down 13 in the first half where he gets the defender to fall, hits it straight on. That was cool. Zach Clemence, I thought that was a really cool play when he read that one alley-oop pass, gets in front of it. He immediately passed to Dajuan Harris, then goes to Storr for the dunk. And I think that was, I mentioned briefly that I liked the Zach Clemence minutes. I thought he was really decisive and aggressive. And those two things we haven't always seen from him, that I was impressed with what he brought to the table when he came off the bench for the limited time in 7 minutes. That was a cool moment. I guess the best moment is probably just that 7-0 run you went on to start the second half where you're like, okay, here comes that Kansas onslaught. They're going to be fine. They're going to win this game. And then, things did not certainly finish that way. Worst moment, I don't know, pick your Pop Isaacs open 3, pick your Pop Isaacs made shot. Okay, this might be the worst moment. We're going to give out a separate award for this. the Jalen Hurts push award. No tush, just all push. It goes to Stephen Ashworth. What were your favorite pushes from Stephen Ashworth? Here's my top three. Number three, he had one where he pushed off Dajuan Harris. Looked like he traveled after two, but then Dajuan gets called for the foul. Number two, he had a clear push off on like a drive when they were running. That was the second half. And then number one has to be his push from behind on Zeke Mayo, where the official is right there and doesn't make the call. Stephen Ashworth, just the ultimate Jalen Hurts push award. So congrats to him. And each of those could qualify for worst moment as well. The billion missed layups for KU, a lot of bad moments in this one, as we said. Pretty much everything went wrong. Awful start award for KU. That could really go to the whole team. They got down, 10-2, 11-2 in the early going of this one. But specifically, it's going to go to the KU wings. So the first half was really bad for the KU wings. They, in 20 minutes between AJ Storr, Keys Passmore, wound up just 1 of 5 from the floor. They had 3 fouls. They did have 2 steals, but they had just like 1 rebound in that span, 0 assists. Now Storr ended up with 12 points. He picked that up a little bit. Not great efficiency, 4 of 13, but he did at least end up with 12 points. Passmore was scoreless. He had 1 rebound, 0 assists, 3 fouls, 2 turnovers in his 10 minutes of play, but he actually had a better plus minus. I guess he played way less minutes, but -4 to AJ Storr's -8. The awful start, though, specifically. So the very first drive of the game, Jemiah Neal drives right by AJ Storr, gets a layup. Then AJ Storr takes that really bad mid-range shot at that again, going back to the shot selection thing. Then on the other end, he loses Jemiah Neal off the ball, gives up an easy layup. And then Bill Self's like, okay, that's a bad start. Let's put in Keys Passmore. And immediately he comes in and catches the ball with his heel out of bounds. So that was about as bad of a start as you could figure out. Kansas needs to figure out this AJ Storr thing. They have plenty of time still to do it. I shouldn't say plenty of time. The college season is relatively short. But I guess you're running out of non-con games too. You have 3 non-con games, 4 non-con games remaining. You need to figure out the AJ Storr thing, because AJ Storr at his best can really help this team and would help a team in a game like this where he can grind out buckets for you in a game you weren't really getting those. They have to be able to unlock him in a very real way. Okay, what about our plus minus King and Jester? I guess we could call it. Jester would go to the worst. So the plus minus King in this one, how about Zach Clemence? We mentioned in his minutes. He was +6. He had the best plus minus on KU in the game, +6 in 7 minutes. Good for Zach Clemence. The second best plus minus, you might be wondering, it was Floyd Badunga. He was even. He only played 12 minutes, but he was even. And then you look at the worst plus minus, and it was Hunter Dickinson at -14. Oh, no, actually, scratch that. It was KJ Adams at a -18, followed by Hunter Dickinson at a -14. And what does that tell you? Because it tells me something. I guess the KJ one, I have less to kind of explain with that. But with Hunter Dickinson being -14, whereas Flory and Zach were combined +6, I think that was matchup dependent. Going back to the idea of, okay, it's one thing if Hunter Dickinson's giving you 15, 20 points, especially in a game like this, where you couldn't really score offensively. If Hunter would have been giving you buckets on offense, that would have been huge for you, right? But the problem is when that wasn't happening, now you're just talking about, okay, if you're not getting offensive production from your centers, it just comes down to what are you bringing on the defensive end? And of course, Flory and Zach, who are a little bit more mobile, are going to be better matchups for a matchup like Creighton, where they're going to be bombs away from 3. Now, there are other matchups, like you think about Michigan State, who's playing a couple big men, even Duke to a certain extent, who, Cooper Flagg can shoot threes and Malawak can shoot threes occasionally. They do play, a good amount of size down low, so that actually is an okay matchup for Hunter Dickinson defensively. This was not really one of those. Okay, our offensive MVP of the game, this is tough because, again, I guess Zeke Mayo. I mean, it's not an ultra efficient shooting night. 5 of 13. He missed a couple layups late to kind of ruin the shooting numbers. He actually started okay shooting the ball. 2 of 4 from 3. He had 2 assists to just 1 turnover. So I guess he gets the offensive MVP for this one. I mean, I don't know who else you would go with. I guess David Coit off the bench hit a couple threes, but he was just 3 of 9. You could go with Dajuan for scoring 15, but again, 6 of 21, right? He did have 5 assists, 0 turnovers, but AJ Storr, maybe in the second half, he had 10 points in the second half. That could be offensive MVP. Storr was, to his credit, I thought pretty good in transition. And again, he picked it up at least a little bit in the second half. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's just not really an answer for offensive MVP in this one for Kansas when you have that bad of a performance. Defensive MVP for Kansas. I mean, Zach Clemence had 2 steals in 7 minutes. The per 40 numbers on that are going to be pretty amazing overall. Well, you look at Creighton in this game. Pop Isaacs went 10 of 15, and I think the primary defender on him was Zeke Mayo, so not going to give it to him in this one. Kalkbrenner had 17 points. I mean, do I go with KJ Adams? Jackson McAndrew, their starting 4-man, only had 3 points on 1 of 4 shooting. And then Isaac Trout had 0 points in 15 minutes. He's their other 4-man. Now, they also have Mason Miller, who plays on the wing a little bit too. He had 6 points, but I don't know. I guess KJ Adams did a pretty good job limiting his guys, so he would be up there for consideration. I would also give Dajuan Harris consideration. I mean, Stephen Ashworth hit that one like insanely deep 3. He was only 5 of 14, 3 of 9 from 3. And if you take away that deep 3, he'd be 2 of 8 from 3 and 4 of 13 from the floor. He also had 6 turnovers. Yes, he had 8 rebounds, 6 assists, but he had 6 turnovers. So I actually thought Dajuan did a pretty good job on the defensive end. Obviously, it was a bit of a struggle with all the shots and everything like that. But yeah, in the end, just not great for KU in this one. It's a little tougher to come up with some of these awards. All right, what's next for KU? We discussed that on the other side. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Thanks for joining us on Locked on Jayhawks. We're going to have an episode previewing the Missouri game coming at you on Friday, because that is what is next up for Kansas men's basketball. They're going to be taking on the Missouri Tigers on the road on Sunday. And so they're second straight on the road. Obviously, Kansas did not pass their first road test. You know, other teams have lost before in their first road game too and turned out to be just fine, including Kansas. But you got to bounce back, because like we said, if all of a sudden you lose at Missouri as well on Sunday, then there are going to be real questions about the two performances put together. But if you bounce back, you beat Missouri on Sunday, then, you know, the more you string wins together after this one, the more you'll be able to point back to this one and say it was the albatross, it was the outlier. But if you have some other bad performances, then it becomes more evidence to just that. So how you respond from here is the big part of this. Then you're back home the following Saturday against a 2024 Final Four participant, NC State. Very different team than they were a season ago. But yeah, there's only 3 games left for the non-con for KU, and there's also only 3 games left until, so your conference opener is on December 31st. That means you only have like 3 games now in the next like 3+ weeks. So that works both ways. One, it works in a way where you're not going to have as much basketball on over the next couple of weeks, but also it works in a way that Kansas is going to have more practice time. I guess some of that you're going to have finals week, some of that you're going to be traveling for Christmas, so it's not going to be as much as that indicates, but you'll probably have a little bit more practice time than normal to really start working on some of this stuff and figuring out roles and figuring out where everybody slots in and trying to get to the best version of yourself. I did want to do a quick update on KU volleyball, KU women's basketball here before we go. KU volleyball 24-4, got a 3 seed for their NCAA tournament region. They seed the top 8 in each region. They were number 12 overall. They're going to be hosting Colgate on Friday at 6:30 in Horish. They swept them earlier this year, so trying to get by them again. And then if they win, they get either 6 seed Florida or NC State. Last year, they got the 4 seed, and they ended up having to play a really good Penn State team in the second round. So getting the 3 seed, Florida's still got a good team, but makes it a little bit easier for them to try to make it out to that second weekend. And then for KU women's basketball, they're sitting at 7-1. They got Wichita State on Thursday night. They just had a big 3-win stretch at the U.S. Virgin Islands Paradise Jam. Pitt, Northern Iowa, Auburn, 3 wins. So they're rolling right now, early part of the season. They're rolling in recruiting. Great start for Brandon Schneider and company after losing all those seniors from last year's team. But Samaya Nichols keeps them going in a very real way. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. We'll be back for a KU Missouri preview on our next episode on Friday. See you then.